My name is Annie McKinney. I'm 62 years old, a widow for nearly 7 years. I live alone in a small duplex on the edge of Meridian, where I grow tomatoes, read old novels, and sometimes make myself a martini on Friday nights. I used to have a happy family. My husband Harold died of lung cancer at 58. My daughter Annie once called me her hero. Now she only calls when she needs money. Like that evening when she and her fiancé Henry invited me to dinner at Franco's, the restaurant where Harold and I celebrated our 25th anniversary. I thought it was a dinner for reconciliation, but it wasn't. It was the night they tried to steal everything I'd spent my life building. The burgundy dress hangs in my closet like a silent witness to every version of the woman I've been. Its folds drape against the cedar-scented dark, still holding the faint perfume of those nights I felt beautiful. I bought it 15 years ago, when Lana graduated high school. I remember standing in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric over my hips, wondering if burgundy was too bold for a woman in her late 40s. But Harold had smiled that slow, quiet smile of his and said, "You look perfect." And that night, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the school auditorium, Lana beamed at me from the stage. Her graduation cap crooked her lipstick, smudged from nervous chewing. Later, she clutched my hand and whispered, "You look so elegant, Mom. I want to be like you someday." She didn't know that I'd spent the morning hemming the dress an inch so it wouldn't show my old orthopedic shoes. She didn't see how I pinned my thinning hair into a bun that tugged my scalp tight. All she saw was her mother, radiant in her eyes, worthy of pride. I wore it again 4 years later for her college commencement. She'd lost weight by then, her face slimmer, sharper. Her hugs were quicker, lighter, as if she was always half-turned towards somewhere else she needed to be. But still, when she saw me waiting outside the stadium gates, she ran into my arms, burying her face against my neck. "You look amazing," she said. "I'm so glad you're here." Then came the third time, the dinner after her first promotion at the marketing firm. She reserved a table at that trendy fusion place downtown, where waiters wore black shirts and menus had no dollar signs. I wore my burgundy dress, my single string of pearls, and my best attempt at confidence. Lana sipped white wine and told me about brand portfolios and cross-platform synergy, with the practiced ease of someone rehearsing their new identity. But at the end of the night, as she kissed my cheek goodbye, she lingered just long enough to whisper, "I hope I grow up to have your grace, Mom." Tonight, as I slide the dress over my 62-year-old frame, I wonder if this will be the last time I wear it for her. The satin lining feels cool against my skin. My arms look different, no softened by age, mapped with pale freckles Harold used to kiss on lazy Saturday mornings. I smooth the fabric over my hips, noticing how it clings a little tighter. My hair is shorter these days, easier to manage. The stylist calls it a chic wedge. I call it what it is, practical. In the mirror, I catch my own eyes. They look tired. Not from lack of sleep, though some nights are worse than others, but from the quiet ache of being needed less and blamed more. 3 weeks ago, Lana and Ethan came over on a humid Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when my small duplex traps the heat and my ceiling fan squeaks with every rotation. They sat across from me on the old floral sofa. Harold and I bought secondhand the year he got promoted to foreman. Lana's posture was perfect, straight-backed ankles crossed neatly. Ethan sprawled next to her, his arm draped casually across her shoulders like he was claiming territory. "Mom?" She said, her tone that bright, brittle cheerfulness she uses when she wants something. "Ethan and I have been working out the wedding budget, and we're hoping you can help with the costs." I remember blinking at them, wondering what number they'd say. 10,015. Enough for flowers or catering or a down payment on a venue. 100,000, Ethan said, tapping his phone screen. That would cover the essentials. My first thought was that I misheard, that perhaps he meant 10,000. But then Lana leaned forward, her eyes wide with expectation, as if I'd won the lottery years ago and had simply forgotten to mention it. $100,000, I repeated, tasting the words in my mouth. They felt foreign, absurd. That's a lot. Ethan shrugged. It's really not considering the kind of wedding Lana deserves. Lana nodded. Mom, you know Dad's life insurance left you comfortable. You've been sitting on that money for years. We need it now to start our life together. Right. As if Harold had died just to fund their Italian marble bathroom and honeymoon in the Maldives. I told them I could contribute $15,000, which was everything I'd saved that year by cutting groceries, skipping hair appointments, and choosing the cheaper arthritis medication over the brand name. Lana's face hardened. Ethan looked away, bored, scrolling his phone again. That day, for the first time in my life, I saw a look in my daughter's eyes I'd never seen before. Cold calculation stripped of softness. The little girl who once picked dandelions for me was gone, replaced by a woman measuring her mother's worth in dollar signs. Tonight she's asked me to dinner. She called this morning while I was trimming basil in the garden behind the duplex. Her voice sounded softer, almost trembling. Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe we were both stubborn. Can we talk? I want to work this out. Hope bloomed in me despite myself. She was 3 months pregnant, barely showing yet, and I thought, perhaps growing a life inside her had awakened something that remembered sacrifice, that remembered me. I finished my makeup with a careful hand, a touch of lipstick, the same shade I wore to her high school graduation. In the mirror, the woman staring back looks composed, dignified, ready. But beneath the burgundy dress and pearls beats the heart of a woman who knows that tonight may not be about forgiveness. It may not be about love. It may simply be the next move in a game I never wanted to play. I pick up my purse slip on my low heels and turn off the bedroom light. As I walk past Harold's photo on the hallway table, I pause. His smile is the same gentle curve it always was, frozen in a world before loss and betrayal. I touch the glass lightly. Wish me luck, love, I whisper, because tonight as I step out in my burgundy dress to meet the daughter I raised, I carry with me not just hope, but the quiet knowledge that hope, when betrayed enough times, can become something far more dangerous. It can become resolve. 3 weeks ago, on a humid Sunday afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table listening to the whir of the ceiling fan overhead. It was the kind of summer day that pressed heat into your bones, that made the curtains hang limp and the window glass sweat. I was slicing strawberries into a ceramic bowl, planning to sprinkle them with a little sugar for dessert. Something simple, something sweet. Lana and Ethan arrived unannounced the way people do when they're either bringing good news or demanding something they know you might say no to if given time to prepare. Hey, Mom, Lana called as she stepped inside, not bothering to knock. Her voice was bright, too bright, like the reflection of sun off chrome. Ethan followed close behind, smelling faintly of cologne and hot pavement. He carried himself the way men do when they believe the world is designed for their convenience. Broad steps, chin-lifted eyes scanning for weakness. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and smiled at them both. Well, this is a nice surprise. I was just making some strawberries. Want a bowl? No, thanks, Lana said quickly, glancing at Ethan before sitting down across from me. Her posture was flawless, back straight, ankles crossed neatly. Ethan remained standing, looking around the small kitchen with open distaste, before finally settling into the chair beside her. For a moment, the three of us sat in silence. The ceiling fan squeaked with every rotation. Outside, cicadas shrilled in the trees. I noticed Ethan's hand resting lightly on Lana's thigh, his thumb tapping a silent rhythm. Lana smoothed her skirt, took a breath, and spoke. "Mom, Ethan and I have been working on the wedding budget." I smiled again, this time with genuine warmth. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I've been putting aside some money to help. Tell me what you're thinking." She hesitated, and I saw her eyes flicker to Ethan again. He gave her a quick nod, as if confirming the script they'd practiced on the drive over. "We need 100,000, she said. The words dropped into the quiet kitchen like a stone thrown into still water, sending ripples through my chest. "I'm sorry," I said after a moment. "Did you say $100,000? "Yes," Ethan answered, his voice calm, patient, almost bored. "It's really not that much for a wedding these days, especially not the kind Lana deserves." I blinked at him, trying to see if he was joking. His expression didn't flicker. "We've already talked to the planner." Lana continued her tone, shifting into the brisk, efficient voice she used when presenting campaigns at work. "The venue alone is 40,000. Then there's catering, photography, my dress, the honeymoon. We're looking at total costs of around 150,000. But if you could contribute 100, we can cover the rest." I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, ambitious daughter, with her father's hazel eyes and my stubborn jaw, and felt something tighten inside my chest. I thought of the years Harold and I spent clipping coupons at the kitchen table, drinking store-brand coffee, eating baked potatoes for dinner to save for Lana's college tuition. I thought of Harold working overtime, his hands raw and bleeding in winter, so she'd never have to know what it felt like to go without. I thought of the life insurance check that arrived 3 weeks after the funeral, its numbers stark and impersonal on crisp white paper. I put it away untouched except for necessary repairs to the roof and replacing Harold's old pickup when it finally died. That money was my safety, my dignity, my independence in the years I would have to navigate alone. "Lana," I said softly, "I can't give you $100,000. Her lips pressed together into a thin line. Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Mom," she said, her voice tight, "you've been sitting on that money for years. What are you saving it for? You don't travel. You don't remodel the house. You barely buy yourself anything." "I'm saving it for my retirement," I replied evenly, trying to keep my voice calm. "For medical expenses, for emergencies, for living." Ethan's mouth curled into a small, contemptuous smile. "You're 62, Mrs. Harris. Don't you want to see your daughter happy while you're still around to enjoy it?" Happy? As if happiness was something that could be purchased in bulk from a wedding planner's spreadsheet. I took a slow breath. "I can give you 15,000, I said. "That's what I've saved this year. It will cover a beautiful ceremony here in town. Maybe the catering too." The silence that followed felt sharp as shattered glass. Lana's face changed. I watched it happen in real time, the soft disappointment hardening into something cold and brittle. Her eyes, once so quick to fill with tears when she fell off her bike or got her first rejection letter from NYU, now narrowed into a look that sent a chill down my spine. 15,000, she repeated. "That's insulting." "Lana?" I began, but she cut me off with a flick of her hand, a gesture that reminded me so much of Ethan. I wondered when she'd started adopting his movements. "Mom, you're being selfish," she said, her voice rising. "You're sitting on all that money while we're trying to start our life together. Don't you want me to be happy?" The words hit me harder than I expected. I opened my mouth to respond, to tell her that happiness didn't come from imported Italian marble or designer florals flown in from California, that Harold and I were happy with garage sale furniture and homemade wedding cake as long as we had each other. But when I looked at her face, I saw no space for my words to land. Her eyes were flat, reflecting only her own desire. Her mind was already made up. Ethan reached over and squeezed her knee, nodding slowly. "We'll give you some time to think about it," he said, standing. "We're booking vendors this month, so the sooner the better." They left without another word. The door closed behind them with a quiet finality that reverberated through the small kitchen. I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the half-sliced strawberries, the small mound of sugar on the counter. The ceiling fan turned above me, creaking in its tired orbit. Outside, cicadas screamed into the heavy air. And for the first time since Harold's death, I felt truly, utterly alone, not just because my husband was gone, but because my daughter, my own blood, had become someone I no longer recognized. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence, so thick it pressed against my chest every time I walked past the family photos lining my narrow hallway. Lana didn't call. Ethan didn't text. Each day I told myself it was for the best, that I didn't want to hear her voice sharpen into accusation again, that her absence was easier than her contempt. But every night as I turned down the sheets alone, I felt that old ache bloom under my ribs, the ache of missing someone who was still alive. I spent those weeks tending my small garden behind the duplex. Tomatoes ripened heavy on the vine. Basil sprouted faster than I could pinch it back. Every morning I carried my coffee mug outside to breathe the sweet damp air before the sun burned away the quiet. Sometimes I caught myself imagining Lana there, with me barefoot on the dew-wet grass, like when she was 8, pointing out ladybugs on cucumber leaves, her laughter floating into the cotton candy sky of dawn. But then I'd remember her voice from that afternoon, so cold, it made my hands tremble. "Don't you want me to be happy?" As if my existence was measured only by how much I could give her. On a Tuesday morning, the call came. I was kneeling in the garden, trowel in hand, scraping out a patch of stubborn crabgrass near the fence. My knees ached and sweat dampened the collar of my gardening shirt, but I felt calm in the way only small, purposeful work can make you feel. When the phone rang, I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, a flicker of mother's intuition, that old, unbreakable tether, made me wipe my dirt-streaked hands on my jeans and answer, "Mom." Her voice was different, soft, hesitant. I sat back on my heels, closing my eyes for a moment against the rush of relief that surged through me. "Hi, sweetheart," I said carefully. "How are you feeling?" There was a pause, and I heard her exhale shakily. "Better," she said. "The morning sickness is easing up. They say the second trimester is supposed to be easier. Pregnant. My daughter was pregnant." The reality of it pressed into me with quiet force. I thought of her as a baby herself, how Harold used to cradle her against his chest, humming old Motown songs until she fell asleep, drooling on his flannel shirts. I wondered if she'd hum to this baby, if she'd remember how her father smelled of sawdust and aftershave and kindness. I'm glad to hear that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've missed you." Silence again. "Then I've been thinking about what you said, about the money. Maybe we were both too stubborn. Ethan and I want to take you to dinner, talk things out. Would you like that?" My heart lifted despite myself. Hope is a stubborn, traitorous thing. Even after betrayal, it rises again, thin and trembling, but alive. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. "I'd like that very much," I said already, planning what I might cook, what I might say to bridge this widening canyon between us. "Actually," she said quickly, "Ethan and I thought we'd take you out somewhere nice. You know, to make it up to you." "Oh," I said, startled. "Where that Italian place on Hawthorne Avenue, Vincenzo's. You always loved it there." My breath caught. Vincenzo's. where Harold had taken me for our 25th anniversary, where we'd sat in a candlelit booth, his work-roughened fingers laced through mine, sharing tiramisu and talking about the retirement trip to Maine we never took, where he'd told me I was more beautiful at 50 than the day we married. I hadn't been back since he died. Mom Lana's voice pulled me back. "Does that sound okay?" "Yes," I said, the word trembling in my throat. "That sounds wonderful." "Great. 6:30 tomorrow. 6:30. I'll be there." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet garden for a long time, staring at the tomato vines, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Hope flickered through me like sunlight through leaves. Maybe the silence had given her time to reflect. Maybe feeling life grow inside her had awakened something that remembered what it meant to be loved without condition. I stood slowly, my knees creaking, and brushed dirt from my jeans. As I walked inside, I passed the hallway mirror and caught sight of myself, hair pulled back in a messy bun. Crow's feet etched deep at the corners of my eyes, dirt smudged across my cheek. But under all that, I saw something else. A softness, yes, but also steel. A quiet resolve that came from knowing you'd survived too much to be easily broken. That night, I pulled the burgundy dress from my closet and laid it across the bed. The satin shimmered in the lamplight, the color deep and dignified. As I ran my fingers over the fabric, I whispered a prayer I wasn't sure who I was addressing. "Harold, God the universe. Please," I said, "let this be real. Let her still be mine." But in the deepest part of me, where grief had carved out truths I could no longer ignore, another voice whispered back, "Be ready if it isn't." Vincenzo's looked just as I remembered. Warm brick facade window boxes, overflowing with late summer petunias, the soft glow of candlelight spilling onto the sidewalk through gauzy curtains. As I stepped inside, a swirl of garlic and rosemary rose around me, mingling with quiet jazz and low conversation. For a moment, I felt like I was stepping back in time into a night where Harold still sat across from me, hands wrapped around a glass of Chianti eyes crinkling with every smile. "Table for 3, the hostess asked with a bright smile. She was young, maybe Lana's age, with clear skin and eyes that still believed the world would be kind to her. "Yes, I'm meeting my daughter and her fiancé." She checked the ledger. "They're already here. Right this way." I followed her through the intimate maze of tables, past couples leaning toward each other, past a family celebrating a grandmother's birthday, with balloons tied to her chair. At a corner booth, I saw Lana. She rose as I approached her, smile wide, a flicker of something almost like relief crossing her face. "Mom," she breathed, stepping forward to hug me. Her perfume wrapped around me, sharp citrus layered over something sweeter. For a moment, as I buried my face in her hair, I felt the familiar ache of love bloom in my chest. "You look beautiful," I whispered against her cheek. "You too," she said, pulling back quickly. She gestured to the booth. "Sit. Ethan's parking. He'll be in soon." I slid into the booth across from her, smoothing my burgundy dress over my knees. Up close, I could see the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. Pregnancy, I thought. Fatigue and hormones. I wanted to reach across the table and cover her hands with mine to say, "I'm sorry. Let's fix this." But something in her eyes kept me still. Minutes later, Ethan arrived. He walked with confident, purposeful strides, his tailored navy suit pristine, his hair combed into smooth perfection. But what caught my attention wasn't Ethan. It was the 3 men walking behind him. They were dressed in near-identical charcoal suits, crisp white shirts and conservative ties. Each carried a slim leather briefcase. As they approached, Lana shifted in her seat, her gaze dropping to the tablecloth. "Mom," Ethan said brightly, bending to kiss my cheek. "Thank you for coming." I forced a smile confusion threading through me. Of course. Who are? Before I could finish, Ethan straightened and gestured to the men behind him. These are some colleagues of mine. They'll be joining us for dinner. Hope you don't mind. Colleagues, at a family dinner. My stomach tightened as I watched them slide into the booth beside Lana and pull up 2 extra chairs from nearby tables. Within moments, the small corner table felt crowded, claustrophobic. One of the men, silver-haired with a gleaming gold watch and manicured nails, leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Mrs. Harris," he said smoothly, his smile professional, but empty of warmth. "I'm Richard Kirk, Ethan's attorney. Thank you for meeting with us tonight." "Attorney?" I echoed, my voice sounding thin in my own ears. I looked at Lana, waiting for her to explain, to laugh, and say it was a misunderstanding, but her eyes remained fixed on her water glass, her thumb rubbing a slow circle against the condensation. "Yes," Ethan interjected, his smile wide and bright. "We wanted to take this opportunity to go over some documents that will make things easier for everyone." "Documents," I repeated slowly. What documents? Richard Kirk opened his briefcase with practiced precision and pulled out a thick stack of papers, sliding them across the table toward me. "It's a standard power of attorney, Mrs. Harris. We're recommending you appoint Ethan and Lana to manage your financial affairs." The words hit me like a slap. I stared at him, then at Ethan, whose smile never wavered, then finally at Lana, my daughter, my little girl. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine for just a moment. In that flicker, I searched for the daughter who used to bring me bobby pins she found on the carpet, certain they were treasure. The daughter who asked me to braid her hair every morning until she was 12. But her gaze dropped away just as quickly, leaving only a stranger in her place. "I don't understand," I said, though part of me did. Part of me had known from the moment I saw those 3 men walk in behind Ethan. Why would I need this? Ethan leaned forward, folding his hands as if he were about to deliver comforting news to a panicked client. "Look, Mom," he said, his tone dripping with false reassurance. "You're 62. Managing investments, property taxes, it's complicated. We just want to make sure you're protected, that your assets are being used efficiently. Lana's worried about you living alone, making decisions without help." "My age," I said quietly. "You think I'm too old to manage my own money?" "Not too old," Ethan said with a condescending chuckle, just unprepared. "This is about streamlining your affairs so you can enjoy your retirement without stress." I glanced down at the stack of papers in front of me. Legal words blurred together. Durable power of attorney, revocation of previous arrangements, transfer of management. My chest tightened until it felt like I was breathing through a straw. "And if I don't sign?" I asked softly, forcing myself to keep my gaze on the papers instead of the pitying eyes watching me. Silence fell over the table. The other 2 men shifted in their seats, exchanging quick glances. Richard Kirk cleared his throat, ready to speak, but Lana beat him to it. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Then, you won't see your grandchild." The words fell between us like shards of glass. My vision blurred with unshed tears, but I refused to let them fall. I raised my eyes to hers. For a heartbeat, I saw a flicker of regret, or maybe it was only fear that her tactic might fail. Then it was gone, replaced with that same cold calculation I'd seen weeks before. "It's your choice, Mom," she continued, her voice flat. "But we've talked to a lawyer about grandparents' rights. They're pretty limited in this state, especially when the grandparent has a pattern of being difficult. Difficult." I tasted the word, felt it burn on my tongue. Around us, the restaurant continued as if nothing had shattered. A couple laughed over shared pasta. A waiter poured wine into gleaming glasses. The jazz trio in the corner played a languid standard, Life went on indifferent to the small silent deaths happening at table 17. I looked at my daughter, at the man she'd chosen, at the 3 lawyers who watched me with the polite detachment of predators observing weakened prey. And in that moment, something in me hardened. Grief cooled into resolve. The trembling hope I'd carried into that restaurant crystallized into something sharp and unbreakable. I straightened my shoulders, smoothed the burgundy dress over my lap, and reached into my purse for my phone. Because if they thought they were the only ones with allies in this world, they were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. My hands didn't shake as I scrolled through my contacts, though inside a silent storm raged. I pressed call. Connor answered after 2 rings, his voice low and calm. "Mom, everything okay, Connor? I need you to come to Vincenzo's. Now." He paused. "Is Lana there?" "Yes. Bring your hospital ID." I hung up before he could ask more. Around me, the table of men shifted, restless. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What was that?" "I called my son," I said evenly. "Before I sign anything, I want his input." "That's not necessary." He snapped, then forced a smile. "We don't want to bother him with paperwork. He never minds when his family needs him." Lana shifted beside Ethan, rubbing her belly protectively. Her eyes darted to mine, then away, staring at the linen tablecloth as if willing it to swallow her whole. We sat in tense silence for 12 minutes before Connor arrived. He walked in wearing navy scrubs, hair still damp from his post-shift shower, hospital ID clipped to his chest. At 37, Connor carried the quiet authority of a man who made life and death decisions daily. He bent to kiss my cheek. "What's going on? Lana and Ethan have documents they want me to sign," I said, gesturing to the stack. Connor flipped through the pages with quick efficiency, brows tightening at the notarization clauses. Setting them down, he turned to Ethan. "This is a power of attorney transfer," he said quietly, voice slicing like a scalpel. "You're asking her to sign over management of her finances, investments, real estate, and insurance." Ethan cleared his throat. "It's for her own good. Managing these things is complicated at her age." Connor's jaw clenched. He turned to Lana. "Did you know about this?" She didn't meet his eyes. "We thought it would be easier." Connor nodded slightly, leaning back. "And if she doesn't sign," Ethan shifted as a young lawyer spoke up quickly. "Mrs. Harris has limited grandparents' rights in this state. If she refuses to cooperate, visitation could become difficult." Connor's gaze flicked to him, flat and cold. "Are you threatening her access to her grandchild?" Ethan raised his hands in mock surrender. "Of course not. We're just explaining reality." Connor looked at me, fury tightly leashed in his eyes. "Mom, do you want help managing your finances?" I shook my head. "No. I've managed fine for 62 years. Balanced my checkbook to the penny last month, renegotiated my car insurance, saved $800 correcting my property tax. I don't need help." Connor smiled without warmth, turning to Ethan. "Then this conversation is over." Richard Kirk leaned forward with a smooth smile. "Mr. Harris, perhaps if you explained the legal complexities," Connor cut him off, voice low and dangerous. "They're irrelevant without her consent. Pursue this, and I'll file for injunction based on coercion and undue influence. I'll also contact the Elder Abuse Task Force, first thing tomorrow." For the first time, Ethan's confident smile faltered. "Let's calm down," he said tightly. "We're family. Just planning responsibly." Connor narrowed his eyes. Planning responsibly would have meant coming to her alone, without lawyers, without threats, without tying her grandchild to a ransom note. Lana flinched, eyes brimming with tears. But it wasn't grief or regret. It was fear. Their plan was unraveling. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but Connor cut him off again. You will not contact my mother without going through me. If you intimidate, manipulate, or restrict her grandchild access, I will pursue every legal avenue to protect her. Silence fell. Richard Kirk gathered the papers into his briefcase. Perhaps we should reconvene another time. Excellent idea, Connor said coldly. Ethan stood abruptly, chair-scraping the floor. Come on, he snapped at Lana. She rose slowly, cradling her belly. As she passed me, she whispered Mom, her voice breaking. But I stayed silent. Love without respect is not love. And tonight she showed me exactly how little she respected me. They left without another word, lawyers trailing behind. Connor reached across the table and took my hand in his warm, steady grip. For the first time that evening, I let my tears fall, not out of weakness, but out of relief and fierce, trembling gratitude that I still had a son who saw me not as an obstacle or an ATM, but as a person worth protecting. It's okay, Mom, he said softly. I've got you. And in that moment, I believed him. Connor closed the folder, jaw tight, eyes dark, with a protective fury I hadn't seen since he was 12, and punched a boy twice his size for calling Lana a slur. Under the table, he squeezed my hand, warmth steadying the tremble I'd been fighting since Ethan walked in with his entourage. Ethan cleared his throat, his smile snapping back in place. Mrs. Harris, he said smoothly. Lana is pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. Don't you want her and the baby to have security? This isn't about taking anything from you. It's about family. Family. The words sounded foreign in his mouth, like a language he mimicked without understanding. Before I could reply, Connor's phone buzzed. Relief flickered across his face. Actually, he said, standing with quiet authority, someone else wants to join this conversation. I turned, heart lifting, as Michael appeared, weaving through tables in his blue ER scrubs, coffee stain on his chest pocket, hair mussed from a long shift. At 39, my firstborn carried a calm, unflinching presence that commanded respect without demanding it. Sorry I'm late, he said, squeezing my shoulder gently before sitting beside me. Dr. Harris, Ethan said stiffly, We weren't expecting you. That's obvious, Michael replied coolly. Connor slid the folder to him. Michael flipped through the pages, brow furrowing deeper with each line, then closed it with deliberate care. Power of attorney, he asked, his voice quiet, but edged with steel. Really, Lana? This is what you want? Lana's eyes flicked up to his before dropping to her lap, thumb rubbing circles over her belly. It's for the best, she whispered. For who? Michael snapped. For Ethan. His business deals, or for you so you never have to hear no. Again. Ethan bristled. Look, Dr. Harris, this doesn't concern you. It's a family matter. Michael's gaze cut to him, flat and cold. She is my family. You're a parasite. Ethan opened his mouth, but Michael silenced him with a flick of his fingers. He turned back to Lana, his voice softening, though sorrow shadowed his face. I love you, Lan. Always have. But this isn't love. This is manipulation. Extortion. Tears slid down Lana's cheeks. For a fleeting moment, I saw my little girl again, the child who used to sneak into Michael's room at night to whisper her nightmares away. Michael took a deep breath, then faced Ethan and the lawyers. Here's what's going to happen, he said, voice firm and surgical. You'll pack up these papers and leave. If you ever contact my mother about her finances again, I'll pursue elder abuse charges and a restraining order. Is that clear? The youngest lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Richard Kirk forced a tight smile. Perhaps we should discuss this another time. No, Michael interrupted quietly but with force that snapped Kirk's mouth shut. There will be no next time. Ethan's fingers tapped an erratic rhythm against the table, his mask of charm gone replaced by simmering rage. Beside him, Lana sat silent, thumb rubbing her belly mascara, streaking down her cheeks as she stared at her folded hands. Connor reached across the table, taking my hand in his strong grip. Michael laid his hand over Connor's, forming a fortress around mine. In that moment, surrounded by my son's quiet, unflinching love, something shifted deep inside me. The trembling fear that had plagued me for weeks settled into something steadier, something dangerously close to rage. I realized then I was not alone. I never had been. And for the first time since Harold died, I felt strong enough to fight back. Silence settled over the table like dust after a storm. Ethan shifted, tapping his pen angrily, while the lawyers exchanged quick, calculating glances. I sat quietly, feeling Connor's hand over mine. Michael's layered on top, forming a protective barrier. For the first time in weeks, my pulse slowed, my breathing eased, but beneath that calm, something colder stirred resolve. I pulled my hands free, folding them neatly in my lap. My voice, when it came, was calm and almost gentle. I thanked the boys softly, but told them it was time I spoke for myself. Michael leaned back and nodded. Connor squeezed my shoulder before dropping his hand. I turned to Ethan, meeting his eyes squarely, and for the first time he didn't smile. I told him he saw me as an obstacle to manage, not a person to respect. When he tried to deny it, I raised my hand lightly to silence him. Then I turned to Lana. Her tear-streaked eyes flicked up to mine, wide and pleading, but beneath the sorrow lay cold calculation. I told her she called me here under the guise of reconciliation, but it was never about that. It was leverage. She whispered for me to stop her voice breaking, but I shook my head as tears pricked my eyes. I told her she threatened me with the one thing that would hurt most. My grandchild dangling that baby like a carrot on a stick, and for what money? Control over the life her father and I spent 40 years building. She sobbed silently, not denying it. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Pressing call, without looking at Ethan, who demanded to know who I was calling. When the line connected, I spoke calmly, asking Louisa to come with the documents. Ethan's face went pale as I explained Louisa Morales was my attorney. Richard Kirk tried to salvage the meeting, insisting we could resolve it amicably. I smiled lightly and told him we were about to. 15 minutes later, Louisa arrived, small and sharp-eyed in her navy pantsuit, radiating quiet authority. She sat beside me, opening her thick folder with precise movements, and explained that 2 weeks ago, I established an irrevocable trust, transferring all my assets with Connor named trustee, until both heirs reached 25. Ethan went white. Lana sobbed softly. Louisa clarified that the trust covered medical education and reasonable living costs, but not extravagant weddings or imported marble for social media posts. Ethan spat that this was insane, and I couldn't cut Lana out. My voice shook with emotion as I told him I wasn't cutting her out. I was protecting it for her from him. Ethan turned to Lana, demanding she do something, but she just cried silently. She knew the game was over. Louisa closed the folder with a soft click and declared the meeting over, unless anyone had further business. Connor stood, slipping his arm around me. Michael rose beside him, his gaze sweeping the table with quiet finality. As we stepped into the cool evening air, my knees went weak, but Connor's steady arm kept me upright, while Michael pressed his hand to my back, whispering that I did good. I took a deep breath, tasting freedom on the night breeze. For the first time in years, I felt strong. Not because of my sons beside me, though they steadied me like oak roots in deep earth, but because I finally remembered who I was, a woman who could not and would not be moved. Ethan's eyes darted across the table, searching desperately for support, but the lawyers were already gathering their papers with studied detachment. Richard Kirk cleared his throat. Mrs. Harris. he said, forcing a tight smile. Perhaps we should reschedule this conversation for a time when emotions aren't so high. No, I said softly, folding my hands in my lap. I think this conversation is over. Ethan slammed his palm onto the table, rattling the water glasses. You're making a mistake, he spat, voice rising. You think you've won, but you haven't. Lana, tell her. Tell her she can't do this to you. Lana sat silent, staring down at her lap, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. For a moment, my heart twisted with a grief so sharp, it felt like a knife between my ribs. I thought of the little girl she'd been, the one who snuck into my bed on stormy nights, who clutched my neck at kindergarten drop-off, who cried when I left early from her ballet recital to pick up Michael from basketball practice. I wanted to reach out and brush the hair from her eyes, to whisper that I forgave her, that everything could go back to the way it was. But forgiveness offered under threat is not forgiveness. It's surrender. Finally, Lana looked up at me, her eyes swollen and red. Mom, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, I need to know you'll take care of me. I have taken care of you, I said, my voice trembling with emotion I could no longer contain. For 34 years, I have sacrificed every piece of myself to keep you safe, to give you a life your father and I never had. But I will not sacrifice the last pieces of my dignity to fund your illusions. A strangled sob escaped her lips, but she didn't argue, because she knew I was right. Ethan scoffed, pushing back from the table so hard his chair screeched against the hardwood floor. This is pathetic, he sneered. Let's go, Lana. But she didn't move. For a long moment, she just sat there staring at her hands, tears dripping silently onto her manicured nails. Lana. He snapped, his voice sharp enough to make her flinch. Slowly she rose, gathering her purse with shaking hands. As she passed me, she paused, her perfume once comforting, now cloying, swirling around us. I'm sorry, she whispered, but her eyes were blank, distant, as if reading from a script she no longer believed in. I watched them walk out of Vincenzo's, Ethan striding ahead with anger in his shoulders, Lana trailing behind, her head bowed. Around us, life continued as if nothing had fractured a couple toasted with champagne, 2 tables over. A child laughed as a waiter brought out a candlelit dessert. The jazz trio played a slow, mournful tune in the corner. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Michael squeezed my shoulder gently. Connor reached across the table and took my hand in his warm, steady grip. You did it, Mom, he said softly. No, I whispered, blinking back tears. We did it. We stood gathering our things in silence. Louisa packed her folders with efficient movements, nodding at me with quiet approval. As we walked out into the cool night air, the breeze kissed my damp cheeks, carrying away the scent of garlic and wine and betrayal. Outside, the parking lot was half empty. Crickets chirped in the hedges lining the sidewalk. Michael walked ahead to pull the car around, while Connor waited with me under the soft glow of the restaurant sign. How do you feel? He asked, his voice careful. I closed my eyes, letting the night breeze wash over me. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. My shoulders no longer carried the crushing weight of dread. I feel free, I said quietly. Finally free. Connor pulled me into his arms, holding me close against his chest. I smelled the faint trace of antiseptic and hospital coffee clinging to his scrubs, grounding me in the truth that even after loss, life continues in small, ordinary ways. You're stronger than you know, he murmured into my hair. No, I said, pulling back to meet his eyes with a weary smile. I've always known. I just forgot for a while. Michael pulled up to the curb, leaning over to push open the passenger door. Connor helped me into the front seat before sliding into the back. As Michael pulled out of the lot, I looked back through the tinted windows. Through the restaurant's gauzy curtains, I could still see the empty table where I'd sat moments ago, where everything had changed. I thought of Lana sitting there, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. I thought of Ethan's rage, impotent and childish. And I thought of Harold, who would have sat beside me strong and unyielding, his hand wrapped around mine. "I hope I made you proud," I whispered silently to him in the dark. As we drove through quiet streets past shuttered shops and darkened houses, I felt a flicker of something warm in my chest. Not hope was too fragile, too easily broken. This was something steadier, something solid, resolve. Because tonight I hadn't just protected my money. I'd protected the woman I'd fought so hard to become. And for the first time in years, I knew whatever came next, I would never again surrender myself to anyone's demands. I was free, and I would never let them take that from me again. 3 weeks later, I stood in my kitchen waiting for the coffee maker to finish its slow, sputtering drip. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, catching on the dust motes dancing above the linoleum floor. Harold and I lay 23 years ago. The house felt different now. Not empty, but peaceful. There was a difference I was learning between loneliness and solitude. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 o'clock. I'd come to appreciate punctuality even more since Vincenzo's, since I learned the value of people who said what they meant and arrived when they promised. "Right on time," I said, opening the door. Janet stood on my porch holding a covered casserole dish and wearing a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. She was 67, recently widowed, and had moved into the duplex next door 2 weeks after Ethan's attempted ambush. She knocked on my door one morning with leftover blueberry muffins and a direct gaze that told me she didn't come to gossip. She came to build something solid from our adjacent griefs. "I brought cornbread," she said, stepping inside. "And I heard something interesting at the bank yesterday." I raised an eyebrow as I took the dish from her hands. "Do tell." She settled into the chair that had become hers over the past weeks, unwrapping the cornbread with practiced efficiency. Apparently, Ethan Smith's business accounts have been frozen, pending an internal investigation. Something about escrow irregularities. I let out a slow breath, feeling no triumph, only the quiet satisfaction of justice working itself out without my intervention. Revenge, I was learning, is most satisfying when served by the universe itself. "And Lana, I asked, though. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer." Janet shrugged, slicing into the cornbread. "Word is she's been shopping wedding dresses at the outlet mall. No Italian marble bathrooms in her near future." I nodded, absorbing the information with calm neutrality. I no longer felt the wild swings of anger or guilt when her name came up. Just sadness. A quiet mourning for the daughter I once knew. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. I hesitated before answering, the old tightness gripping my chest. But when I checked the caller ID, it was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Mrs. Harris." The voice was young female, a little nervous. "This is Diana Reed from the Meridian Community Center. I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all," I said. "How can I help you?" Well, she began. "We heard about your situation from Louisa Morales. She mentioned you might be interested in some volunteer opportunities." I glanced at Janet, who was listening politely, while scraping the last crumbs of cornbread onto her plate. "What kind of opportunities?" I asked. "We run a program for seniors dealing with financial exploitation by family members or caregivers. Peer support, legal resources, emotional counseling. Louisa thought you'd be uniquely qualified to help." I sat down at the kitchen table, staring out the window at my garden. Basil and tomatoes spilled over their planters, riotous and uncontained. Life goes on, I thought, even after betrayal, even after heartbreak. "I'd like to hear more," I said. For the next 20 minutes, Diana outlined the program: weekly meetings, legal workshops, one-on-one, mentoring for seniors too, ashamed or afraid to admit what was happening to them. As she spoke, something flickered to life inside me, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. When I hung up, Janet raised her eyebrows. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" I nodded slowly. "I think I am." "Good," she said, standing to rinse her mug in the sink. "It's time you did something that's yours." After she left, I sat alone in the quiet kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee and cornbread lingering in the air. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been: Harold's wife Lana, and Michael's mother, the silent grieving widow, the frightened target of her own daughter's greed. But now, for the first time in my life, I felt like something else entirely, whole. Because freedom isn't just the absence of oppression, it's the presence of purpose, the knowledge that your worth does not depend on who loves you, or who needs you, or who demands something from you. That afternoon, I put on my gardening gloves and stepped into the backyard. The air was warm and fragrant with tomato vines. Kneeling down, I pressed my hands into the dark, rich soil, feeling its cool firmness cradle my palms. As I planted new basil seedlings along the fence, I whispered to them softly, the way I used to whisper to Lana when she was small. "Grow strong, grow where you're planted, and never let anyone uproot you without a fight." It was a gray October morning when the letter arrived. I found it in my mailbox, tucked between grocery store flyers and an electricity bill. The envelope was pale pink, her handwriting unmistakable, small, neat loops that once filled my birthday cards with sunshine words and tiny hearts. My chest tightened as I carried it inside, setting it carefully on the kitchen table next to my coffee mug. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at my name written in her familiar script. Mom. 3 months had passed since Vincenzo's. I hadn't heard her voice since that night, only snippets through Michael or whispers in the grocery store. Janet told me she'd seen Lana at the pharmacy one afternoon, her face pale and drawn dark circles smudged beneath her eyes like bruises. Pregnancy is hard, Janet had said softly, but her eyes held a deeper worry. Neither of us spoke aloud. I picked up the envelope, sliding my thumb under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of stationery pink, lined to match the envelope. Her scent rose faintly from the paper vanilla lotion, and something sharper, a perfume I didn't recognize. Mom, I don't know how to say this. The baby is here. Her name is Eleanor after Grandma. She's perfect. Dark hair, long fingers, tiny rosebud lips. She looks like you, everyone says. I wanted you there, but Keithan. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I blinked them away, forcing myself to keep reading. He isn't happy, Mom. Not with me. Not with Eleanor. Ever since that night at Vincenzo's, he's changed. Or maybe he was always like this, and I just couldn't see it. He says if I can't get the trust changed, if I can't get him access to your money, then I'm worthless to him. He told me yesterday that if I don't fix this, he'll make sure I never live peacefully again. That he'll take Eleanor and leave me with nothing. I believe him, Mom. I really do. My hands trembled as I clutched the letter tighter. Outside the window, wind rattled the shutters, sending dry leaves skittering down the driveway like frightened mice. I know I don't deserve your help after what I did. I know I betrayed you. I was so stupid, so blind. I thought he loved me. I thought he was strong. But he's just cruel. And now I don't know how to protect her. I don't know how to protect myself. Please. I'm so scared. I don't have anyone else to turn to. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please help me. Love, Lana. I sat there for a long time, the letter limp in my trembling hands. Tears fell silently onto the pink paper, blurring her small, desperate words. I thought about Eleanor, my granddaughter, tiny and perfect with dark hair like mine, asleep in a bassinet somewhere in a house that no longer felt like a home. I thought of Lana sitting alone, Ethan's threats ringing in her ears, fear coiling in her chest, like a nest of snakes. Rage rose in me, hot and sharp. Rage at Ethan for his greed and cruelty. Rage at Lana for her betrayal. Rage at myself for still loving her despite everything. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into its envelope. Then I stood and walked to the kitchen window, staring out at my small herb garden. The basil had begun to wither with the chill in the air. Soon frost would claim the tender leaves, but the roots would remain buried deep and silent, waiting for spring to come again. I thought of the woman I was 3 months ago, the woman who trembled under Ethan's threats, who nearly signed away everything she and Harold built. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone unmovable. I picked up my phone and called Michael. He answered on the second ring as his voice warm with quiet concern. "Mom, everything okay?" "No," I said softly. "But it will be. I need you to come over. We have to help your sister, and we have to protect Eleanor." He was silent for a moment, then sighed deeply. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. After I hung up, I pressed the letter to my chest. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but there was no fear in them. Only sorrow and love, and a fierce, unbreakable resolve. Because whatever Lana had done, whatever choices she'd made, she was still my daughter, and Eleanor was innocent. I would not abandon them to Ethan's cruelty. I would not let him do to them what he tried to do to me. I set the letter down and poured a fresh cup of coffee, my hands steady now, because I knew what needed to be done. I knew who I needed to be: a protector, a mother, a grandmother, a woman who could not be moved. 6 months later, I sat in the small meeting room of the Meridian Community Center, steam rising from the paper cup of weak coffee in my hands. Around me, a dozen women and 3 men sat in a loose circle of folding chairs, murmuring quietly as they waited for the session to begin. The walls were painted a pale, hopeful yellow. A bulletin board near the door displayed flyers for grief counseling, diabetes screenings, self-defense classes. On the far side of the room, a banner read, "Seniors helping seniors, you are not alone." I looked down at my notes for tonight's topic, setting boundaries without guilt. A smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined leading a support group like this. Back then, I was drowning in my own guilt, my own shame, my own fear of loneliness. But life has a way of reshaping us when we think we're done growing. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice steady and warm. Conversations quieted, faces turned toward me with trust and expectation. For our newcomers, my name is Irene Harris. I'm here because, like many of you, I learned the hard way that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Tonight we're going to talk about guilt, about how predators, whether they're strangers or family, use guilt to control us, and about how to reclaim your power, one boundary at a time. Nods around the circle, eyes shimmering with tears held back. A quiet hum of recognition filled the room. After the session ended, a woman approached me as I gathered my things. She was small, her back slightly stooped, white hair pulled into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. Her hands trembled as she clutched her purse strap. "Mrs. Harris," she whispered, eyes shining with tears. "Thank you. I thought I was alone. I thought maybe I was crazy." I reached out and held her thin, cool hands in mine. "You're not crazy," I said softly. "You're brave, and you're not alone anymore." She nodded, wiping her cheeks with a wrinkled tissue before slipping out the door into the twilight. I gathered my papers into my bag, and walked out into the evening. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of lavender and gold across the sky. The air was cool, filled with the faint scent of fresh-cut grass and distant barbecue smoke. Michael's car waited at the curb. He stepped out as I approached, smiling tiredly. He'd just finished a 12-hour ER shift, and exhaustion shadowed his eyes, but when he saw me, his whole face softened. "How was group tonight?" he asked, opening the passenger door. "Good," I said, sliding in. "Hard, but good." He climbed into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb. We drove in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "Mom, are you sure about tomorrow?" My chest tightened, but I nodded. "Yes, it's time. Tomorrow I would see Lana and Eleanor for the first time in 6 months." After that desperate letter, Michael and Louisa helped her file a restraining order against Ethan. With legal protections and therapy, she was slowly piecing herself back together. She'd moved into a small apartment across town, working part-time for a local florist. It wasn't the life she imagined for herself, but it was a life free of fear, a life where she could breathe. And tomorrow she wanted me to meet Eleanor. I closed my eyes, picturing the baby. 7 months old now, chubby cheeks, dark hair, bright, curious eyes, my granddaughter. My heart ached with love and grief all at once. "Do you think she'll ever forgive me?" I asked Michael quietly, for not giving her what she wanted. He reached over at a stoplight and squeezed my hand. "She already has, Mom," he said softly. "And even if she hasn't yet, one day she'll understand. You didn't just save her money, you saved her life." I blinked back tears as he released my hand and turned onto our street. As we pulled up to my duplex, I saw Janet watering her flowers on the porch. She waved when she saw me, her silver hair catching the porch light like a halo. I stepped out of the car and inhaled the cool evening air. The world felt wide open, edged with possibility. For so long, I thought my life was over after Harold died. Then I thought it was over again when Lana betrayed me. But standing there under the indigo sky, I realized something true and simple. I was still here. I was still growing. And I was stronger than I had ever known. Tomorrow I would hold Eleanor. I would kiss her soft cheeks and breathe in her baby scent. I would tell her stories about Harold, about the father yet she would never meet, but whose quiet strength lived on in her bones. And when she was old enough to understand, I would teach her the most important lesson I ever learned, that love is not about sacrifice without limits, that dignity is not selfishness, and that the strongest women in the world are those who know when to stay, when to leave, and when to stand so still no force on earth can move them. Because I am Irene Harris, mother, grandmother, protector, and no one will ever take my power again. This story reminds us that true love sets boundaries, not sacrifices of dignity. It shows that a mother's strength is not in giving endlessly, but in knowing when to stand firm and protect what she has built. It is a testament to resilience, no matter the betrayal or loss. We can stand up, reclaim our strength, and become invulnerable to those who seek to break us. What do you think of this story? Leave a comment.